I've been playing a lot of AAA titles of late, and because of this I decided that I needed a bit of a retro fix, so I got out the old Nintendo Entertainment System, and I've been having a blast playing some of the games from my childhood. Because of this, I decided to make my top 10 list of my favourite NES games. Please note, this is just my personal list of games that I grew up with. But I would love to know what games you grew up with, and what your favourite games are on this system. So please do let me know in the comment section below. So starting at number 10, we have the first game that I ever saw and played on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and that is the original Super Mario Bros. Prior to the Nintendo, I had only ever gamed on the Atari 2600 and a Spectrum 128K, which, don't get me wrong, were both fun at the time, but were nothing like when my parents would take me to the arcades, as that was a completely different gaming experience, certainly in terms of quality. So this game to me at the time was obviously just awesome, as it actually felt like I was playing an arcade game at home. The story, which was relatively simple, go and rescue a captured princess, would introduce me to characters that would go on to become iconic in the history of gaming, which never would have entered my mind back then. The graphics, while simple by today's standards, were at the time awesome and nothing like I'd seen on a home computer or console before. The in-game music and sound effects were unique and really catchy, and are still remembered, referenced and used to this day. But it was the gameplay that made this game so addictive, as it was just a super fun, responsive, side-scrolling platformer with unique power-ups and special abilities, as well as secret hidden areas in the form of warp zones that would let you skip to later sections of the game. It was also a pretty challenging game, especially for someone who would have been a very young kid at the time, but that never stopped me or my friends coming back for more over and over again, and in my opinion it definitely deserves a place in my top 10 list. At number 9 we have a game that I'm pretty sure won't be on many people's list, and that is a game called Roller Games. I absolutely loved this game as a kid, and I would always be playing it. This was a side-scrolling beat-em-up on roller skates, where your aim was to take out the criminal organisation known as Viper. To do this, you could pick from one of 3 skaters from 3 different skate teams: the California Kid from the Rockers, Icebox from the Thunderbirds, or Rolling Thunder from Hot Flash. Now I feel that this is a really underrated game on the NES, as the graphics were good and the music was fantastic, and it was just a solid fun game, and despite it being a pretty easy game once you got good at it, that you could then complete in around 20 to 30 minutes, for me at least it offered a ton of replay value, as the gameplay was just so good, hence the reason this unlikely game takes the number 9 spot on my list. At number 8 is a game that I feel won't appear in many people's top 10s, and that is Blades of Steel. Now it's an ice hockey game, and being from the UK, I have no idea how I ended up purchasing this game, as I never knew anything about ice hockey, and I still don't to this day. But this game gave my friends and I countless hours of fun when we were kids. We would just spend an entire Saturday playing this game and creating our own mini tournaments, as it was just such a fun game, especially when playing co-op with your friends. The game was just non-stop action, going from end to end of the ice rink, trying to score that elusive goal to beat your friend. The other great thing was that you could actually get into fights with your opponent in order to gain control of the puck, which added a unique aspect to the gameplay, which would inevitably find my friends and I purposely getting into fights in the game, as it was just such a fun experience. The game also had really great sound effects, from the noise of the crowd to the sound of the puck hitting the barriers or goal. It was just something that I never forgot, even after all of these years. So if you've never tried this game, then I highly recommend it, and I'm glad to include it on my top 10 list. At number 7 is a game that again may surprise some people, and that is Ducktales. This was a cartoon that I grew up watching, so when the video game came out for the NES, I of course wanted it, and I'm pleased to say it was one of those rare occasions when a licensed video game actually turned out to be really good. Now whilst this platformer was a relatively short and simple game, that does not mean that it was not enjoyable, as every level had a unique look and feel to it. And it had you adventuring through places like the Amazon jungle, Transylvania, the African mines, the Himalayas, and even the moon. You played as Scrooge McDuck, who would use his cane to either hit objects, or as its primary function, to bounce around on, a bit like a pogo stick, which would enable you to destroy enemies, or reach areas of the level that would appear to be at first glance unreachable. This would allow you to find hidden secrets and treasures. The graphics were decent for the time, and so was the music. It recreated the look and feel of the cartoon as best it could. So this to me was a great game, and I'm pleased to have it on my list. At number 6 I've picked Mega Man 2, as this for me is a classic and in my opinion the best Mega Man game in the series. Now I'm not going to lie, I find Mega Man games pretty challenging, even to this day, and Mega Man 2 was no different. Yet I did find this game slightly more accessible, since it had a normal difficulty setting. There are 8 boss enemies in the game that you have the choice of facing: Bubble Man, Air Man, Quick Man, Heat Man, Wood Man, Metal Man, Flash Man and Crash Man, all with their own unique abilities contained within their own unique stage. You have to overcome each boss before you can face the final boss of the game. Defeating these enemies grants you access to their own unique abilities, which can be used against one of the other bosses who has a particular weakness to one of those abilities. This is a super challenging game, but it's also an incredibly fun game. And it also has one of those memorable soundtracks. This is one of those games that will frustrate you, but you will still, however, keep coming back for more. At number 5 we have Bionic Commando. I really think this is a game that a lot of people overlook and never really speak about, but it really is a good game, and I remember putting many hours into this game as a kid. You play as a commando, armed with a cannon and a bionic arm, and your mission is to take out the bad guys. At the time, I'd never played a run and gun action platformer game like this, as you never had a jump button, and instead had to use your bionic arm to manoeuvre around the level, which does take a bit of time to get used to. So mastering the art of using your bionic arm is certainly what you need to work on to fully enjoy this game, and I guess that could put a lot of people off. But when you do get to grips with it, you really start to enjoy what this game has to offer. However, this is a pretty difficult game, and you can find yourself dying due to not using your arm correctly. I know I'm not exactly selling this game, but honestly I loved this game so much when I was younger and would always be playing it, and I have so many good memories of it, and that is why I had to find a place for it on my list. At number 4 we have Double Dragon. This was a go-to game of mine in the arcades, and I'd play it almost every weekend at the Seafront arcade as a kid, as I was a massive fan of beat-em-ups. I owned Double Dragon on the Spectrum 128K computer, and well, it wasn't that great on that system. But when I saw it was out on the NES, I was super excited, as I thought it would be as close to the arcade game as it could get at that time. And honestly, I wasn't wrong. Whilst the arcade game will always be the top tier version of the game for me, this was still the best version you could own, and I loved this game. As soon as you switched on the game, that iconic intro music would play, and then you would just start the game and proceed to try and rescue your captured girlfriend from the Black Warriors gang and defeat the final machine gun wielding boss. This game was nothing more than a simple side-scrolling beat-em-up, consisting of only 4 missions. But these were some of my favourite kind of games, and this one on the NES was top draw. It may not be for everyone, but this was one of my favourite games on the system, so it had to be included on my list. At number 3 we have, in my opinion, one of the best games on this system, especially if you're a sports fan, and that is Punch-Out! I originally said in my top 10 SNES games that I thought the SNES version of this game was better, and graphically it certainly is. But after replaying it on the NES, I really do prefer it on this system. Now maybe that's just my nostalgia kicking in, but it was just something about holding that old school controller in my hands and the simplicity of how the game plays and flows, that just took me back to being a kid again, trying with all my might to beat all of the unique opponents that this boxing game has to offer. I do believe that when sports games are done well, and there are a number of them that actually are, then they can be an extremely fun experience that offer a lot of replay value, and this to me is a top tier sports title and a top tier game full stop, and I'm quite comfortable at placing this at number 3 on my list. At number 2 I've chosen Batman. This game was just fantastic, albeit fairly challenging, and one of the best Batman games I had ever played. The more modern day version of the Batman games are of course far superior, but back when the 8-bit era of games were around, then this version of the game was king. It was a side-scrolling action platformer beat 'em up with a kick-ass soundtrack to boot, and you had to use your various abilities from bare fists to batarangs to take out the various enemies from stage to stage. There were 5 stages in total, each with their own mini bosses you had to take out before your ultimate face-off with the Joker. This was a game that you would die in a lot, and you would find yourself restarting from scratch more often than not, until you got better, but it was still a game that when all of my friends came around my house, everyone wanted to play it. This may be controversial, but it is my number 2 on my list. So at number 1 we have Super Mario Bros. 3, and this for me is the best game on the entire console. I first saw this game in a movie called The Wizard, which was about a video game competition, and Super Mario 3 appeared as the secret final game at the end of the competition. I can actually remember watching it and thinking that this game looks awesome. When I was finally able to own a copy of the game myself, it did not let me down, as this was just the best platformer game I had ever played, and that opinion would not change until I played Super Mario World on the SNES. This game had everything, numerous power-ups ranging from the Fire Flower power-up to the Flight power-up. It also introduced to us the Raccoon, Frog and Hammer Brothers suit, as well as hidden areas and mini-games. The levels were all varied and offered their own degree of difficulty. This game was just a complete package of fun and gave many people, including myself, countless hours of fun. In my opinion, it's the best game on this system by far, and proudly sits as my number 1 pick. Anyway guys, thanks for watching my little nostalgia trip on my top 10 NES games. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite games are, and as always, thanks for watching, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.